The Small Business Boot Camp came about a couple years ago when we felt that the public and the businesses and those interested in starting a business would benefit from having support during the pandemic and all that. So the Small Business Development Center got connected with the SBA, with the town of Newburgh, and the Newburgh Free Library. And the four organizations decided to co-host a series called the Small Business Boot Camp. So all of the presentations are on the portal of the Newburgh Free Library. If you have registered for any of their trainings, you have access to those recordings, and you can listen and watch them whenever you want. And there's about, I don't know, a dozen different trainings that we've done since fall of 2020. So it's been an ongoing series, and we've covered a lot of different topics, but tonight's topic is new. So we have Gary, who prepared a great presentation on the difference between not-for-profits and social ventures, which people often confuse. They think they want to start a not-for-profit, but really what they need to start is a social venture. So Gary's going to give clarity on that topic. And I am very sorry that I'll have to leave early for another meeting, but I will watch the recording when we get the link. And without further ado, Gary, you can take the podium and start your presentation.
Wow, okay. Hello, thank you, Miriam. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna see if I can do this. Not the best at this. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, now we can. So if you click on the little icon at the bottom that looks like a of your presentation, so it comes full screen. It's at the bottom. There's like four little icons. One that looks like a little screen.
You got it.
Bottom right.
Now what are you seeing?
I see two pages.
You see two pages?
I see a small one and a big one.
Well, if I was better at this, I would fix
full slide.
So we can proceed.
Okay.
It's all good.
So good morning, good afternoon. Okay, nonprofits versus social ventures. So very quickly, Gary Schuster, I'm a partner at Jacobowitz Gubits. We are in Walden, New York. We've got 23 lawyers these days. We've been around for more than 50 years. I work in business and nonprofits and arts and entertainment and guardianships and estates and various things. And I'm on 5 boards, for God's sake. One of which is NICON, the New York Council of Nonprofits, which kind of teaches nonprofits how to be nonprofits. So I do a lot of this. So this presentation, we spent a fair amount of time on what is a nonprofit and not really comparing it to a business, because I assume most of you people know what a business is. So I'm going to sort of highlight why a nonprofit is different from a business, and then get into the B Corp, B certification, social venture. What are those things? How do we tweak the traditional entities, that being the business corporation and the nonprofit corporation, to make something different? Please ask questions. Just pipe right up and ask me a question. Okay. So one thing is, do we call it a nonprofit or not-for-profit? Well, in New York, our law is called the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law. That's the name of the law. So we commonly call it not-for-profit, even though they're largely interchangeable. Some people say that not-for-profit applies to an activity, while not-profit applies to an organization. Basically, don't worry about it. Don't let that slow you down. Just call it whatever you want. From a legal perspective, an entity perspective, there's all sorts of corporations. There's banking corporations and railroad and insurance and business and religious and municipal. There's lots of different kinds of corporations. And in one sense, some of them are taxable and some of them are tax exempt. And the presumption, of course, is that they are taxable unless you go to the Internal Revenue Service and submit an application and say, hi, please recognize me as tax exempt. So you have to take that step. The presumption is you're taxable. If you form a corporation, they're going to send you a tax bill. So you have to take a positive step to become tax exempt. Within the tax exempt category, there are charitable and non-charitable tax exempt nonprofits. I'll get into some examples later. And then within the charitable sphere, we have public charities and private foundations, and those are, there are differences between those. So that's the big picture. I'm going to get into some detail as we proceed. So as it says, a corporation is presumed to be taxable unless it is recognized as tax exempt. 501c3 is what everyone has heard of, and that is the charity. Then you have there's more than 20 of these 501c's, up 22 or 23 of them. 4 is the social welfare organization. 5, as you can see, labor, agricultural, horticultural. 6 is business league, like a chamber of commerce. 7 is hunting and fishing clubs, and there are many, many others. Okay, so in order to be charitable, you have to demonstrate your tax exempt purpose. The law sets forth several of these types of activity that are tax exempt. There you have it: charitable, religious, educational, scientific, and so on. Now, charitable is very broad. It's very old. Traditionally, it was things like relieving poverty, promoting health, religion, education. More modern activities are environmental conservation, economic development, community development. So these are more modern. Charities, ancient, hundreds of years old. It's been recognized as a tax-exempt activity. So who owns a charitable nonprofit? A lot of people say, well, I started this nonprofit, I own this nonprofit. Well, not really. The people of the state of New York own the charity, and the directors really are just the trustees, managing the property, the money, the land, the library, the theater, the art museum, whatever it might be. Ultimately, the owners are the people of the state. Donations or contributions are tax deductible only to the charities, not to the non-charitable. You can't give money to a hunting club or a labor union or a chamber of commerce and get a tax deductible, a tax deduction. Only charities are eligible for that. Another important point people don't always know is that when a charity dissolves, its remaining assets must go to a similar charity. If you have a humane society and you're going out of business, you have to give your assets to another humane society, or a theater, or a hospital, or wherever it may be. The idea is that the assets remain in the charitable sector and are used for the charitable purpose. Okay, let's see. What are some non-charitable examples? A homeowners association, a social club, chamber of commerce. Okay. The idea is that this is private money. You're not soliciting money from the public. So the Attorney General doesn't really care that much if there's lying, cheating, or stealing going on. They care a little bit, but they don't care as much as if you would be soliciting from the public and misusing that money. They're much more concerned about that. Okay, have yourself, okay. And now, an important thing. So I said dissolution of a charity, the money has to go to another charity. If a hunting club dissolves, the money goes back to the members. You say, okay, we're coming together, we're going to form a hunting club, we're going to buy a little land, we're going to put up a cabin, we're going to come and hunt and shoot. If we decide to close it, we get our money back because it was our money, it wasn't the public's money. So that's a big difference between the charitable and non-charitable organizations. What is a tax exempt purpose? Well, it goes back to the list I had before. which is here, over there. And that's somewhat different from a mission statement or a vision statement. A mission statement is kind of, it says here, a formal summary of the aims and values of an organization. A vision, what we want to do in the world. Those are sort of marketing mechanisms. They're ways of focusing attention. But when you go to the Internal Revenue Service, when you go to the Attorney General and say, why are we tax exempt? You have to use those phrases from before: poverty, education, religion, community development, conservation. That's the tax exempt purpose. Okay, are you a private foundation or a public charity? The IRS presumes that every organization is a private foundation unless it passes what's called the public support test. You have to show that you're obtaining your funds from the public. So here on the right, some very famous, well-known private foundations. So you've got rich people, the Gates, the Rockefellers, the Fords. They take a whole bunch of money and they put it into an organization, and that organization distributes the money to the public charities for the most part, because it's the public charities that are running the hospitals, running the humane societies, running the museums and the theaters. And so they are a source of money. And they're actually required to give away 5% of their assets every year. The public charities don't have that requirement. So you have to show that you get your money from the public. Let's see, a business plan. That surprises people. I tell them, if you're going to start a nonprofit, I want to know your business plan. And that often makes them scratch their head. You still have to earn a profit. You don't call it a profit, you call it a surplus. You don't get to take the surplus home with you like a business, but you need to put it back into the mission. But you still need to make more than you spend. And you have to think about your revenues and your expenses. And I've had experience with people who misjudge these things. They end up making a lot of money and they can't really take it home with them, or they don't make a lot of money and they go out of business. So you need a business plan, even though you're a nonprofit. When you do the IRS Form 1023, so that's the form you use to apply to the IRS to be recognized as tax exempt. And if you have to do the big form, which is 28 pages long, it's quite a form. As I like to say, there are math questions, essay questions, multiple choice, true, false. There's a little of everything. And one of them is a 3-year financial projection of your revenues and expenses. And so that's required part of the form. There's an easy form you can use if you're smaller, and that's only 3 pages long. There is no financial projection. A small organization, a new organization doesn't need to do it, but it's a good exercise. You should do it to see if you're going to be viable. Where's your money coming from? Okay. Unlike a business, nonprofits are run by committees, and the board of directors is one of them. The New York state law requires there be at least 3 directors at all times. That's pretty small. If you have a working board, you've got to have 5 or 10 or 15. Spread the labor around. Be real about work needs and expectations. I can talk a lot about this. The real point here is that unlike a business, you can't just give orders. The boss just can't give orders. There's a board, there's a committee, and you have to persuade people to agree with you, and you have to hash it out, and you have to come to a consensus. And some people might be unhappy and they might leave, and other people, sometimes there are factions. Oh, there's all sorts of drama. Not always. Many boards are perfectly good, and many boards have drama. So very different from a sole proprietorship or some place where there's clearly a boss. Okay. Apart from the board of directors, you have officers, and these are people who are authorized to act on behalf of the organization. That's the same as with a business corporation. It's the same sort of structure. These are people who have the authority to sign contracts and write checks, and it's not everybody. Not anybody on the board can sign a check or a contract. It has to be an authorized person, and customarily these are president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, chair. Vice president's kind of the same. The law actually says quite clearly these are equivalent. It's just the head person on the board of directors. If you think of a really large organization like a university or a medical center, there could be all sorts of people authorized to sign checks. You don't want the president of, with 1,000 employees signing every contract and every check. So they authorize other officers to do things who may not be on the board of directors. Most of the nonprofits in our area are smaller, so it's often a director. Okay, let's see, members. Things have changed a lot since 100 years ago, even more, when these things were created. Many of these organizations started out as kind of like the social clubs. And so having members who voted and controlled the organization was the presumption. And so a member in New York law means people who are generally paying dues and have the right to vote for the board of directors. Now, more recently, in the last, 30 years maybe, charities don't have to have voting members. We can have what's called a self-perpetuating board, where the board members more or less elect themselves and their replacements and their additional board members. That can only happen in charitable organizations. For non-charitable, the hunting club, the homeowners association, the labor union, the members have to vote for the board of directors. Having members is democratic, and it sounds nice, and it's also a lot of work to send out notices to all your members and to get them to vote and to have a quorum, and it is cumbersome. So I think more and more people don't want to have voting members. So that's a move away from how these things were initially conceived. But non-charitable nonprofits still have to have voting members, like a chamber of commerce or a business league. Okay. Let me repeat. Any questions, you please pipe up. Okay, so if you are a charitable nonprofit, you can enjoy a number of exemptions from tax. So the most obvious one, the first one, is federal and state income tax. The corporation does not have to pay income tax. That said, there is something called unrelated business income. So if you are, you're a animal shelter, but you have a room somewhere where you rent out to an accounting firm, or you decide that you're going to sell, ice cream on the side. Well, that's not related to the mission and the exempt purpose of protecting animals. So they call that an unrelated business income, and you may well have to pay tax on that. Now, there's no some people are horrified about paying taxes. I think if you're earning money and you have to pay a little bit to the government, well, you're still earning money. Some people think that's horrible. I think it's okay, unless it gets to be too big. At some point, and it's somewhere about a third, between 30 and 35%, if that income becomes too large, the IRS is going to look at you and say, you know what, you're not really being a nonprofit anymore. You're starting to look like a business, and we're going to revoke your tax exemption. So it's okay to have unrelated income, but it's got to be basically under 30% of gross revenue to be safe. Let's see, what is that? Sales tax. You can be exempt from New York State sales tax, which is very nice. You go to You go to Target, you go to Home Depot, you go to Lowe's, you go to Staples, and you buy office equipment or furniture or what have you. You don't have to pay sales tax, so that's a nice thing. But you have to apply for it. There's a form to fill out with the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, and you have to show them your corporate paperwork and so on, and then you get a certificate, and you can show that to the stores, and they will not charge you sales tax. The other one is the corporation franchise tax, which is not a big tax, and it's not an everyday sort of occurrence. But if you want to dissolve, the Attorney General, who's part of the dissolution process, wants to see your exemption of this. So I routinely advise every corporation to go get it, go apply for it, so you'll have it. Someday you'll need it. Also, we have real property tax. And if you're a nonprofit that owns land, you may be exempt from real estate taxes, which is obviously a big number. School tax, county, town, village tax, that can be a very big savings. It ain't so easy. It's a two-part test. The owner has to be a tax-exempt entity. The use has to be a tax-exempt use. So like I said, the animal shelter that's selling ice cream, well, that's not a tax-exempt use. Even though it's a tax-exempt entity, it's not a tax-exempt use. You have to apply for it, and you have to renew it every year. March 1 is the magic date. I do 3 or 4 of these every year, it seems like. And if anybody has land, it's there's a lot to it, but that's enough for the moment. There's the possibility of exemption from real property taxes. A big question I always ask is whether the founder, the person who comes to me, the client, wants to be employed by the organization. Do you want to get paid? If so, it's better not to be on the board of directors. There's a notion that there's a conflict of interest. You have the employer and the employee. And if you're an employee, well, the employer is the board of directors. And so if you're also an employee, well, then you have a conflict of interest. What happens if you want a raise? What happens if you need to be disciplined or terminated? You're on the board, you're judging yourself, and you also have perhaps undue influence over the other board members. So it's considered to be not a best practice. The law allows it in certain circumstances, allows the chair of the board to be an employee. It requires a 2/3 vote of the board of directors, which is a little higher, as you can say. It's not 50%, it's more than that. So it's not a best practice, but it is permitted. What actually happened when they did a big amendment to the law about, it's about 7 or 8 years now. Initially, they wanted to ban it completely. And then us, meaning upstate folks, not New York City, who have smaller organizations and smaller communities, had an outburst and said, listen, we need this. We can't operate this way. You have to give us an exemption here. So this is sort of the compromise position that was arrived at. It's permitted with a 2/3 vote, but it is disfavored. Okay, conflict of interest. It is a mandatory requirement. Every not-for-profit has to have a conflict of interest policy, a written policy, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements there that must be included. I will not read them. You can read them yourself. Basically, the idea is everything has to be done in the best interest of the organization. It can't be for the private benefit of a board member or an employee or a big donor. When does this come into play? Well, we need an office, and our board member has an office building and he wants to rent us a room there. Well, is he charging market rate, above market rate, below market rate? That's a potential conflict of interest. Or we're going to have a big party And our board member here is a caterer, or they have a golf course, and are we going to do it there? So these conflicts are not prohibited, but there's a procedure you have to go through. The first thing is to announce it. Well, we're going to have our golf outing at such and such golf club. Well, if the owner of the golf club, he's got to raise his hand and say, I own that golf course. I have to announce my interest in this transaction. And then you have to stay out of the deliberation and so disclosure, and the rest of the board has to satisfy itself that it's still a fair transaction, that the organization's not overpaying. Okay. Conflict of interest. Oh, here's a definition. A matter to be acted upon by the board confers or is perceived to confer, oh yes, all this legalese, a benefit, direct, substantial financial benefit to any officer, director, or key person. A key person, initially it was an employee, but the key person is a broader concept and basically means somebody who has influence over the policies of the organization. So that could be an employee, certainly. It could also be a donor, a big donor who has the ability to, well, as I say, influence the policy. Where are we going to have our golf outing? Well, I'm giving you $1 million this year, and I want you to have it at my nephew's golf course. That's the sort of thing they're getting at. Okay. A related party transaction is sort of a species of conflict of interest. That's when the organization does business with a member of the board, one of those key persons, an officer, director, or a key person. No corporation shall enter into a related party transaction unless the transaction is determined by the board to be fair, reasonable, and in the corporation's best interest. And for charities, there's another element, which is that they have to look for alternatives. So, you want us to use your nephew's golf course, fine, but there's 3 other golf courses in the area, and we could use them, and we need to consider those alternatives. We may end up with your golf course, and this has to be written in the minutes. This decision and the deliberation needs to be in the minutes. The idea, well, I could talk a lot about minutes too. That's the record. You're supposed to follow the rules. And should something happen, should the attorney general come after you, or should you get sued for something, the first thing the lawyers are going to say is, show me the minutes where this decision was made. And did you follow the rules? And who voted yes? And who voted no? And if it's not in the minutes, then everybody's guilty. And if it is in the minutes, so that's, Sally voted no and Johnny voted no, so they should not be held liable. And did you follow the rules or not? So minutes have to be written with that sort of thing in mind. Sort of at a pause here, and would like to invite somebody, anybody, to ask a question. Huh? Got it? No? Okay, fine. Go back to this. Oh, that one. Okay, I think I know how to do this now. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the one slide?
The one wonderfully full
That was
screen.
great.
Absolutely.
Looks great.
Thank you, Gary.
I can learn. Okay, terrific. Okay,
Something
so
other day.
what's got here? What we call in New York the wonderful phrase called a commercial co-venture. So there's the bottle of dressing, and it says 100% profits to charity. So this is a situation where a business promotes itself as giving profits to charity. It doesn't have to be 100%. It could be, $1. It could be $5. It could be 10%. It could be whatever. Anytime a business markets itself as, you buy this thing and we're going to give something to charity, in New York, there's plenty of rules, as with everything in New York. So the business has to use a written contract with all of its charities. There has to be a written contract with all of the terms and conditions. That contract has to be filed with the Attorney General, which presumably keeps people honest, hopefully. Business has to maintain accurate books and records. That's not really asking much, but a lot of people aren't so good at that. You have to give the gross revenue to the charity within 5 days of receipt. Imagine that. And then the law says account to the charity within 90 days of termination of a sales promotion. So there's different ideas about how you run these things. Charity must report, and the charity has to report to the Attorney General on all of the co-ventures that it's getting the benefit of. So there's lots of reporting, lots of disclosure. It's a nice idea, but of course it comes with, obligations. So that's what we call a commercial co-venture. I've never actually run into one, even though I've obviously written about it here. Now we have what we call affiliations and partnerships. So one or more nonprofits want to collaborate in programming, in purchasing, in cost savings. So they usually make a contract. We're going to share our IT guy. We're going to share our marketing people. We're going to buy a bus. We're going to run these programs together. It could be any number of things. So these are actually increasingly common. They may share office space or what have you. So that is often referred to as affiliation. They may or may not, the organizations may or may not have a lot of synergy. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe they just want to, share an office. Okay, there's that. That really is the end of my talk about nonprofits. There's a lot of other things I could talk about. If there's any questions about that, I'm sort of going to move on now to the benefit corporation. Hearing no questions, I will move on.
That looks yummy.
I am starving. Thank you,
There you
Gary.
go. Well, didn't have dinner, huh? Okay.
None of us.
So I did. Okay, I need my strength.
Lucky you.
Just like Newman. So Ben & Jerry is one of the first and leading best known companies to get into this space. Why did they do it? Well, today many businesses want to be progressive or green or sustainable. There you go, socially innovative. They want both profit and public good. So the dilemma was that pursuing the public good can reduce profits and dividends. There was a case with eBay. I'm pretty sure it was eBay that got sued by shareholders. eBay's management, took some of their money and gave it to some cause. And the shareholders sued and said, hey, those are my dividends. Why are you giving it to charity? You're not allowed to do that. You have to give it to me. And the shareholders won. And that was in the last 10 or 15 years, so fairly recent. And it really reaffirmed the notion that the business of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value, and it cannot engage in these kinds of social good. It cannot use the money except to pay dividends to shareholders. So that was one element that led to the benefit corporation. Another one was what we call greenwashing. The idea that a big chemical company, puts trees and flowers and grass on its advertisements while it's poisoning the environment. So how do you get past the marketing to prove that they're actually good corporate citizens and so on? A third element was the idea of hostile takeovers. That was the Ben & Jerry problem. They were, Ben & Jerry were two guys, and it was their money, their profits. They could do what they want with it. But when they began to have shareholders, they lost that control. They had to maximize shareholder value, and along came some outsiders who wanted to buy up everybody else's stock, basically take a takeover of management. And Ben and Jerry said, "Hey, please don't take all that money. We want to stay good corporate citizens." And of course, they lost because people want their money. So all three of these issues led to the creation of the Benefit Corporation. It says here Maryland was the first one in 2010, and a bunch of them followed, including New York in 2011. I can't believe, oh my gosh, it's 11 years ago. I'm getting old. I remember it like it was last week.
You're not getting old, you're getting better.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Let's see, what is this here? B Corporation, a benefit corporation. So this is B-Lab, bcorporation.net. Okay, that's the website to go to if you're curious about this. That's a screenshot of their webpage. It says there that there's over 5,000 companies in the world in 85 countries that are benefit corporations. So it is growing. B-Lab is the best known. There are others. I'll be honest, I haven't kept up too much with this. I'll tell you why. You'll find out why. But it is definitely happening. Let's see what we got here. Oh, where's the button? Yes, so in 2011, New York amended its business corporation law, and they added what is called Article 17, called the Benefit Corporation, to allow the formation of benefit corporations. I asked somebody last week, how many are there in New York? And the answer is 1,891 benefit corporations in New York State. That compares to 1.2 million business corporations and 1.4 million limited liability companies. So you can see it's not that big, but they're out there. Okay, so how do you become a benefit corporation? Well, every corporation has articles of incorporation. It's sort of the birth certificate of the corporation. We hereby form a corporation. Its name is this, the address is that. We're in the business of so-and-so, and a couple of other things. And so you simply say, we are a benefit corporation. And if you are a business corporation and want to convert, you can amend your articles of incorporation and say, we are now a benefit corporation. So it's pretty simple to file that little piece of paper with the Department of State in Albany. Costs $50, $60. It's 2 pages long, and that's not a big deal. You do have to get your shareholders to agree to this, because remember, they're giving up their right to some dividends. They had the right to all the dividends. Now they're going to allow the company to spend some of that money on public good. So they need to approve it. All right. The purposes. So we all know, we've just learned that the purpose of a business corporation is to maximize shareholder value. With a benefit corporation, you must have a general public benefit, and you may also have a specific public benefit. And of course, I'm going to define those for you right now. Every benefit corporation must have general public benefit, look at this, a material positive impact on society and the environment, taken as a whole, assessed against a third-party standard. That's a phrase we're going to come back to, the third-party standard, from the business and operations of a benefit corporation. So you've got to, do good in the world. That can take all sorts of shapes. It can be using less electricity. It can be recycling better. It can be giving money to a soup kitchen, or employing people who just get out of prison, or any number of things. It's just it's broader than charity. We talked about charity. This concept is even bigger than that. So it can be any number of things. Okay. Now, the third-party standard. So a corporation can't set its own standard. It can't police itself. It can't grade itself. There has to be an outside auditor kind of organization that sets the standard. So if you say, okay, we want to use less electricity, this third-party company is going to come in and say, okay, how much electricity did you use last year? How much do you want to use next year? You tell them, and say, okay, we'll be back next year. We'll look at your electricity bills and we'll decide whether or not you used less electricity. So it is an audit kind of function. So two of these third-party agencies are B Corp, which we talked about, and another one called greenbusinessnetwork.org. So you kind of have to hire them. They don't do it for free. You bring them in, you discuss your goals, how are you going to measure things, how are they going to inspect. It can be very quick for a small office, and if you're a big factory, it can take 4 days to wander around the factory and look at this, that, and the other, and find things to measure and things to improve. So it very much varies on the kind of business. Yes. Okay. So what are you measuring? It can be environmental, employment or economic, an underserved community. Yeah, I kind of addressed that. So that's general public benefit. Then you have specific public benefit. A corporation may specify the benefit that it wants to create, providing products or services to underserved people, promoting economic opportunity beyond the normal creation of jobs. These are in the law. These are cited in the law. They're not exclusive. It can be other things, but this is what the law says are permitted as specific public benefits. Health, art, science. Okay. You may have a specific public benefit. So in practice, what does this mean? So management, in pursuing these public benefits, unlike the people at eBay, the managers at eBay who got sued and lost because they were diverting dividends to public good, managers of public benefit corporations will not be sued, and they will be defended. They have the right to use some of that money, not for dividends, but for public good. And the other side of that is the shareholders, if they don't like what management is doing, they can make them do better. They can say, you're supposed to, support this animal shelter down the road from us, but you really haven't done it. So you need to go do it. And they have a legal basis to do that. Now the stakeholders, so the animal shelter that is getting the benefit, they do not have a right to compel better performance. That was thought to be going too far, giving too much rights to outsiders. So management can give away the money. Shareholders can insist that they give away the money, but the beneficiaries cannot insist that they get the money. So that's how that is done. What else here? Okay, the duties of corporate directors. And I imagine most of you people listening would be the director of such a corporation. So this is what are your duties? We know the duties of a business corporation are to maximize shareholder value. So in a benefit corporation, they have what they call mandatory and optional. So mandatory, a director, whenever you're making a decision, we're going to build a new factory, we're going to hire a new person, we're going to start a new product, we're going to do whatever we're going to do, borrow money. You have to think about all these, what are there? 7 things to think about. Will it help you accomplish your public benefit purposes? How will it impact your shareholders? How will it impact your employees and the employees of the people you work with? How will it impact your customers, your community, the environment? And this last piece is aimed at the hostile takeover scenario, what they refer to here as continued independence, the idea that Ben and Jerry could have rejected the offers, the high-priced offers for stock and said, no, we don't want to sell our shares. We want to stay independent. We want to keep doing what we're doing. That's what that's aimed at. So in the minutes of a meeting where the board of directors decides to, as I say, hire, fire, start a factory, start a new product, you have to document that you considered all these things. We think the customers will benefit from this because blah, blah, blah. We think the community will benefit from this because blah, blah, blah. It's got to be written. As I said before, if it's not in the minutes, it didn't happen. That's the first place the lawyers are going to go. Optional. Directors may consider the effects of a proposed corporate action. What's all this now? Okay, this is, once again, the first element here is about the hostile takeovers, persons seeking to acquire, control the corporation, and anything else. So that's pretty much anything else. So the idea here is that you can go beyond maximizing shareholder value. You can think about your community. This is the three Ps: person, profit, person, and planet. Right? You're supposed to think about the world beyond the balance sheet and the profit. That's the whole idea of the benefit corporation. What is this now? In addition, directors do not need to give priority to any particular group. I see. Okay, so, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can choose who you want to benefit, and you don't have a fiduciary duty. Once again, the beneficiaries can't come at you and say, hey, you need to support my hospital. You have an obligation to support my hospital. No, you don't. Unless, of course, you say you will. You can do it voluntarily. They can't come after you. Okay, now for the reporting. You have to have a report card. You have to tell your shareholders and the Department of State how you did last year. You have to write a report. This is where New York begins to get extra burdensome. Other states don't have all these reporting requirements. The annual benefit report. So the third-party standard. So, you know, we want to save electricity. We want to support the homeless shelter. We want to support the soup kitchen. How and why did you choose that? Number two, how did you do in achieving your general public benefit? How did you do in achieving your specific public benefit? What prevented you? You have to put all this in the report. Look at number 5, compensation paid to directors during the year. Do you want to tell the world what you earned? Most people don't. As you can see, you can exclude that information from the copy that you send to the Department of State and on the website, but your shareholders are going to be told. They may or may not like what they see. And number 6, the name of every person who owns 5% or more of the company stock. This whole thing is all about disclosure and transparency and accountability, which is a part of the complaints that people have against, the corporate world. Things are not transparent. There's no accountability. Well, these things are aimed at transparency and accountability. I think that's why there's only 1,800 benefit corporations in the state of New York. Not too many people want to live with this stuff. Okay. That's the report. So here's sort of a comparison. A lot of people, rightfully confused. What's the difference between a benefit corporation and a nonprofit corporation? So what is the corporate purpose? A benefit corporation can have any lawful purpose, any business purpose. A nonprofit can only be charitable purposes, and we discussed what those charitable purposes were. Compensation. I never even mentioned this, but in a business, there's no limit on compensation, and you know that. Some, corporate folks make many, many millions of dollars a year. There is a law in the not-for-profit law in New York State that says A nonprofit can only pay reasonable compensation for services rendered. So what does that mean? In reality, it means that if you're the CEO of, Garnet Medical Center here in Middletown, you've got, I don't know, 600 beds and 2,000 employees. I'm making those numbers up. I don't know what they are, but you've got a big organization. What does a comparable CEO make in Westchester and Dutchess and Sullivan and Rockland? You sort of have to do comps. You have to compare the salaries, and you have to be in the ballpark. You can't give a crazy salary to somebody. Services rendered means you have to work for it. You can't just a dividend is something you don't work for. You invest, you don't work, but you get dividends. When it says services rendered, it means it's not like that. You have to work for it. So the reasonable compensation is the comparable, the comp portion, and working for it is the services rendered. So that's a big difference. Now, the guy at Garnet makes millions of dollars, but so does everybody else who runs a big hospital. So they're in the same range. So that's considered reasonable. Profits and dividends, what happens? Well, in a corporation, they go to the shareholders. In a nonprofit, there are none. Stock appreciation, that's why why do you, I buy it at 10 and I sell it at 20, right? The stock value goes up. That's what shareholders want when they buy stock. There is none of that in the nonprofit sector. Deductible contributions. No, you cannot make a charitable contribution to a benefit corporation. It is not a charity. It's a business. That is not a tax deductible contribution. You can, of course, contribute to charities and get the tax deduction. Assets on dissolution. What happens to the assets when you close down? Well, it goes back to the shareholders. If there's anything left, it goes to the shareholders. And as we said, in a charitable nonprofit, it goes to another similar charitable nonprofit. Oh, political activity. I didn't really talk about that. There are some restrictions on political activity by charitable nonprofits. They cannot endorse specific candidates, and they cannot endorse specific legislation. There's actually more room for political activity than people think. People say, oh, you can't be a politician. You can. There's a lot of things you can do as a charity. But those limits that I just mentioned, you can, for instance, say, we think there should be affordable housing, or we think there should be cost controls in healthcare. You can say, broad general things like that. You can't say we support Senate Bill number 6402, which is going to do that. That's too specific. That's supporting a specific piece of legislation that you cannot do. But you can support broad social goals. So just keep in mind, there's a lot more leeway in political activity than people generally believe. What is the difference between a B corporation and a B certification? So the B corporation is that business corporation, Article 17 in the New York State Business Corporation Law. It's a legal entity. It's the type of legal entity. And other states, like I said, Virginia and Delaware and others, have benefit corporation as a type of legal entity, just like a banking corporation or an insurance corporation or a municipal corporation. Certification is when you go out to one of these two organizations or the others that exist out there, and you have your conversation with them and you hire them to determine what your standards are going to be, what are your goals going to be, and have you met them every year, and so on. So you get certified. So there's some flower, King Arthur flower. We get that at my house, and it comes with the B Corp stamp on it, and you'll see it on packaging. I've never seen the Green America stamp, but it exists. So that's what it means. When you're certified, you get to put this thing on your packaging, tell the world that you're a good corporate citizen and you're you're saving the trees and paying fair wages and whatever else you might be doing. So that's the difference between a corporation, which is a legal entity, and the certification, which means you've passed those tests for your goals. Let's see, what's next? A social venture. So I really dug deep into this and I went to Wikipedia. And social venture comes by a couple of names. An undertaking by a firm that seeks to provide, look at this, systemic solutions to a sustainable social objective. The idea is sort of that you're using business to solve a social problem, basically. It's not primarily aimed at earning profit. You want to earn profit, but that's not really the main goal. The main goal is to help relieve unemployment or pollution or whatever it might be. So you're using business to accomplish a social goal. Here in Orange County, we have at least 2 of these that I'm familiar with because we work with them. Recap, which is an anti-poverty nonprofit that's done all sorts of other things. They get into drug treatment and housing and all sorts of things. They have the Mill Street Cafe and the Fresh Start Cafe. One's in Middletown, one's in Newburgh. There are people, the intention is to give people jobs and to build skills so that they can become chefs or cash register people or whatever it may be. Yes, it's a business, but that's not really the intent. The intent is to take people who have troubles and train them and give them job skills and give them a job. And it is, that's the primary motivation. And it is owned and operated by a charity. So those are 2 examples I'm familiar with here. Social venture could be a partnership. And you think of a partnership between individuals, but it could be a partnership between businesses. It could be a partnership between nonprofits or with the business and a nonprofit, or several businesses and several nonprofits. It could be a kind of joint venture. It could be a single nonprofit corporation or a bunch, a business corporation, benefit corporation, LLC, so they go. It could also be any more. It could be owned by 1 or more of these things. So collaboration between organizations to create such a thing. How to choose the form of entity. Golly, that could be a week. I always start with a business plan. What are you trying to sell? Everybody's selling something. You may be selling healthcare or spaying and neutering dogs or Narcan kits or who knows what. But there's something in the world you're putting out there and you need to make money from it. Now, if you don't make money, then you need subsidies. You need to subsidize your activity. And tax-deductible charitable contributions might be the way that you fill the gap between your revenues and your expenses. This is what I hear from most clients pondering these questions. Like a theater. We have a theater in Sugarloaf, not far from where I live. They've got, 700 seats. Costs a fortune to turn the lights on. They probably need to charge $300 a seat to make money, but nobody in this county is going to pay that money. They'll pay $70 or $80 a seat. So how do they fill the gap? Well, they have to go out and solicit charity. So that's kind of how you think about it. You might need to be a benefit corporation. What does that mean? I wrote that. I should know what that means. You might need to be a benefit corporation. So you don't really need profits, right? So there are also, there are people, for example, the nonprofit world is not for everybody. Committee work is not for everybody. Not everybody gets along with others. They want to be the boss. They are philanthropic. They want to do good in the world, but they don't want to have to deal with committees. So you can start a business corporation and you can just sort of manipulate things so that you don't make a profit. You can spend all your money. And if you don't have a profit, then you're not paying taxes. You're not technically a nonprofit charitable organization, but you are a business that's not making profit and therefore won't have to pay any taxes. So that is one, I don't know what the word is. It's a workaround, perhaps. Okay, so that's all she wrote, folks. That's what I got. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. This was great. This was a really great presentation. Thank you very much, Gary.
You're very welcome.
Learn something new every day.
I'm curious what you folks are doing that is sort of in this field, because I frankly don't see a whole lot of it. I work with lots of nonprofits and I form them, but they're all fairly traditional. I'm not seeing the kind of social venture activity too often. And I have when the benefit corporations started 10 years ago, I kind of went around to the chambers of commerce and I did a presentation and I was sort of selling it and I got no buyers. So I've never really done that either. So I'm curious if you folks are trying it and what you're doing, if anything.
That we know of right now, nobody is actually doing it.
Okay.
They're considering it, and I've gotten questions. However, we don't have that contact information. Is it in there somewhere?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, well, hell yeah. Let's see, how do I do this?
Because the library is closing in about 10 minutes.
Oh,
And we don't want to leave without,
home.
people having access in case
Everybody wants to go home. That's fine with me.
people want to have dinner.
So ice cream, right? That got everybody going, right? Where's that ice cream?
That ice cream
Gary,
got me hungry.
This is Ellen with the City of Newburgh. I get a lot of questions about, should I become a not-for-profit? How do I do this? Like, there's a lot of interesting questions that come through. I thought this was a really great topic. I don't know, can we get a copy of your slides too?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Let me talk
Okay.
to, Miriam could set that up somehow.
Perfect.
Not entirely
Yeah.
sure how. I don't know if you're seeing that. Okay. What are you seeing now? Are you seeing my?
Oh, we see your not-for-profit organizations versus social.
Okay, so there's all my information on the bottom there.
Yes. Thank you.
That's me. I always happy to talk, help people think things through. Not everybody's got an idea that's viable, but their heart's in the right place.
Yes, they do. So we thank you so much, Gary Schuster, Esquire. Love having you here. We really appreciate it. We have a co-sponsorship agreement with the City of Newburgh. I'm SBA, of course. My name is Sylvia Rivera, also known as Lily. And we've been working together and trying to bring more subject topics so that people can expand their horizons. So we
just had one of the security guards tell us we've got to shut down.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well,
so bad because this is such a
thank you so
topic.
much, everyone, for joining us.
And we apologize for the little hiccup at the beginning. I know that we had some issues getting everything rolling, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Guys,
Okay.
thanks again. Please stay safe, and we'll see you on when? October 5th? 2nd?
Yes.
Soon.
Exactly. Yep. For our next topic. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.